Friends, before we dive in today for this kind of unique episode of Fearless with me, Shawna Clingerman, I wanted to give you a little preface. This episode was recorded a little bit over a week ago, and it was recorded kind of in the spirit of full honesty because I wanted to be just 100% real with you. It is a little raw and it is also a lot long. So we went ahead and broke this episode into two parts. The first part will come out right now because you're listening, and the next part will be coming out later this week. But I want to also preface that this episode talks about mental health. And although am not, I don't speak in a lot of detail about a lot of things that would be triggering to folks that struggle with their mental health, I want to give you that fair warning because, as somebody that struggles with mental health, and I know so many others do, sometimes what is best for us is not to consume content that can kind of get us into a headspace that causes us to struggle more. I am talking about a bipolar high episode. So this is not about depression, instead about different feelings, but part of my story is a little like it's a little intense, a little hard. So please listen to this episode respecting your own needs and the needs of people around you, and please just bear with me because it's a little rocky and a little scary to put out there. But also, I know with my whole heart that part of what I'm called to do is to share with you, even in the messiest, even in the darkness, even in the hard times. So, thank you for being a part of this experience with me. I am grateful for you and hopeful that what I share with you over this two-part episode can really be useful to you as you go through your own struggles and as you walk alongside of other people that are still struggling, just like I do. All right, let's get started. Hello and welcome, friend, to Fearless with me, Shawna Clingerman. I am your host, Shawna Clingerman. I am a full-time artist and creative mentor, and simply put, I believe in living, loving, and creating without fear. Here at Fearless, we will together carve out space. Space for ourselves and our creativity, space for our mental health, and most importantly, we will carve out space where we can show up exactly as we are right now with our full, messy, creative hearts. Friend, no matter where you are on your journey toward your own fearless, creative life, there is room for you right here. Oh, friends, today's episode is going to be a little odd because today I am showing up right as I am to talk to you about mental health. Today, we are going to talk about what I'm going through right now, live, not live for you, but live for me in the moment as I go through a fluctuation in my mental health kind of norm. And I'm going to explain that to you more specifically. I am going to talk to you about how it is for me as somebody living with bipolar, a mild form of bipolar, but bipolar. And I want to share with you what it feels like when I'm going through one of my highs, and not just one of my highs, but one of my more manic feeling highs. And as we go, I'll share a little bit about my mental health diagnosis, where I'm currently at, and a little bit about what bipolar is. But I want to preface everything with the note that I'm going to be back in future episodes to talk to you more about my own story in its fullness, to talk to you more about living with mental health, about tips and strategies. And I'm going to do a full episode about where I am now, kind of in a big picture. But where I am now in this moment felt really important because it's such a significant part of the experience of living with bipolar. And I want to see if I can try to articulate for you what it feels like and kind of how it is for me right here and now. Fearless podcast style. Um, Before we get started, you know that I like to do a keeping it real segment, and this is the perfect time for a keeping it real segment because, friends, I am currently going through a bit of a manic bipolar like wave. And so that means I am not um the way that I am showing up is not my normal way of being. If you're watching me on YouTube, would venture to say you can probably even see it beyond the fact that I'm not wearing makeup. There is something that happens um, as I ride that bipolar wave. That I start to look real drained, and I'll explain to you more about why it looks that way. But I'm not at my best. Sometimes when my bipolar highs are happening, I feel like I'm at my best. Um, but this is an extreme version that is not my best. And I'm clear about that. And so it's a little scary, honestly, to show up right now um, publicly and really honestly. Um, Although I've made so much peace with my diagnosis, my way of life, my coping strategies, I also don't know a lot of things. A lot of us don't know a lot of things, but questions like, am I doing it right? Because here I am showing up publicly in this space, and I know that my experience is not everyone's exact same experience. I know that I am not an expert when it comes to medical terms and diagnoses and phrasing. And I also know that I'm not as good when I'm in this phase at things that I usually really heavily rely on, like filtering out things that I maybe wouldn't want to say, or, just presenting myself in a way that feels like people can trust me. This this part of my mental health kind of fluctuation is a part where I can't trust all those things about myself. And it's a little scary to be here in your face sharing what it's like, who I am right now. And, are people going to think that I'm a little crazy? And I don't use that word lightly. I use that quite literally in this moment. The other thing that is always scary during this time, any time that my mental health fluctuates, is that echoing fear that I'm sure anybody who deals with long-term mental health struggles knows well. And it's just that question that pops into your mind. every time you have a high that's really high or a low that's really low, and the question is it going to be really extreme this time? Is it going to be worse than it's been before? And also, what's the consequence going to be? And I'll talk to you about that a little bit more as we keep going. So bear with me, friends, as I show up as real as it gets. I did prepare for this episode, but also there's only so much preparing I can do when I'm walking into a moment like this where everything is really extreme and my feelings are off the charts and where I don't know exactly. I don't know. There's so many things I don't know. I really do believe, though, friends, in creating spaces where we are allowed to show up as we are, messy or proud or tired or sad or totally flipping manic. I believe in creating spaces where that is a safe and accepted thing. So here I am. Practicing what I preach, and I'm going to share with you right now how it is for me. So let's just get started with this. During today's episode, I want to tell you what it feels like to be manic, to be bipolar, and what the actual in the moment experience is like. But before I can explain that to you, I do need to tell you just a little short history about my mental health and my mental health diagnosis, and a little bit about what bipolar is. But we won't go into it too much because that's going to be for another day. Um, Before I start sharing all the details, though, can I give you a little disclaimer? This is like a little, let's say a PSA. This is a little public service announcement for anyone listening who has people in their lives with mental health struggles or who is listening because now you have me in your life with a mental health struggle. But I think sometimes it's very easy when people talk about their struggles, especially struggles that are medical or emotional or spiritual for that matter. I think it's very normal for someone who is healthy and functional, or someone who has even struggled in their own past and is now healthy and functional. It is really normal to listen through the filter of what can I offer this person that I know that they don't know? Or, oh, this seems like a solvable problem. What can I tell them that can kind of set them straight? And I know people probably aren't thinking of it in that blunt of a way, but the truth is that almost always it's not helpful to offer unsolicited advice to people that are struggling. It just is not helpful. Not only that, there is so much nuance in all struggle, in all illness, in all um, personal experience. There's so much nuance that when someone tells you something and you hear a small piece of their story or their diagnosis or their symptoms or their experience, um, it's not fair to assume that you know more than that person knows, because that what you know is only what that person has had the opportunity um, to share with you. What you know is only what you have had the privilege of hearing in this one moment. And the reason that I want to share that is A, for myself, because remember, I'm keeping it real. Um, Sometimes when I share about my mental health, people want to offer me advice on natural solutions or advice on my diagnosis and how it might or might not be correct, or advice on like any of that. The thing is that I have spent a dozen years dealing with my own condition, and the only people that really can speak into my situation are those people that have that breadth of experience right along my side with me. People that have, you know, the medical training, the emotional training, and the real life actionable, like the real life everyday in and out with me, because, my husband has seen me go through things, and the things that he has to offer me come from that understanding. Not to say that I don't want to hear from people, because the reason I share these things is because I believe that things are better when we're not going through them alone. And so, as I share, I want to know your own experience. I want to know your own story. And if that story includes things that helped you, I love hearing that, because I want to celebrate with you. But with me or with any other person that is struggling with something in their life, just be careful that you don't assume that you know things that they don't, because that can feel really threatening. And it can actually be one of the things that keeps people from sharing the struggle. You know what I mean? This is a whole nother episode, and I will come back to it at another time. I'm actually going to write it down right now. I wrote that down because I do want to come back to how we can support each other through hard times. That's so important. But I just wanted to put that disclaimer out there because, as I shared, I am in the middle of the thick of it. And so please be tender with me. I know that I'm putting myself out there, and this is, the internet is a space where people can have any opinions, replies that they would like. But as a person that knows what it's like to struggle, I just wanted to share some tips on how to empathize and interact. The information that I'm sharing with you here is not a cry for help, I promise. It is instead a resource, because so many of us know people that struggle with their mental health, and we know people that have that bipolar diagnosis or are going through the experience of seeking diagnosis. And I want those of you feeling it to know you're not alone. And I want those of you on the outside trying to support people through their struggles to have like a little window, a little peek into the experience. To the best of my ability, I'm going to try to share that with you. So, my short and sweet mental health history is that a dozen plus years ago, I had a severe depressive episode. I was hospitalized for suicide ideation and the reckless suicidal behavior. And during that hospital stay, I was put on a bunch of medications, and um, after finally kind of getting the depression under control, I spent the next, I want to say, 5 years under the care of a psychiatrist who helped me tweak and refine my medical diagnosis and my meds. And also, since that diagnosis, I have spent like 10 out of those 12 years in active therapy, learning strategies and coping with trauma and sorting through the things that I've been through. Um, and that was at age 29 when my big depressive crash happened. I am now 42, one and a half, almost 42, and I manage my mental health really, really well. I have learned so much about how to be healthy and happy in this unique brain of mine. And for the most part, my my bipolar, um, my deep sensitivity, my depression, and like the ADHD, all of those things feel more um like superpowers than they do like big problems most of the time. However, there are times when things flare up. It's just like I kind of consider it like living in remission. Um, if you have an autoimmune disorder, and I don't know a ton about this either, but I know from conversations with friends and that if you have an autoimmune disorder, sometimes it can be better and you're like in remission, like you're not feeling it, like it's not a problem in your life, but you still do take steps to keep it at bay. And sometimes it flares up. And I would say that's how my mental health feels to me most of the time. It feels like something that I keep managed until it flares up. And then I have to manage in different ways and I have to assess and I have to take care of myself in different ways. Today, I am actually not taking medication for my mood swings. And that comes with a big fat disclaimer because, like I said, I did take medication for a very long time. I took a mood stabilizer for, I want to say, 5 to 7 years. Um, and the only reason that I chose to wean off of it is because I sought my medical professionals' help and I got to a place where my mental health was stable enough that it was worth the risk, but being off of medication is always a risk. And I recognize this. And as we talk about this, you'll hear me talk about how I pay close attention and am constantly keeping tabs. I'm constantly assessing my mental health because I don't ever want to end up crashing like I did at the age of 29 again. And I also would never, I would never choose to tough something out that puts my own actual life and my livelihood at risk because when you have a disorder like bipolar or like chronic depression or like OCD or chronic anxiety, any of those things, it's not just a matter of like not feeling bad. What we are trying to do, what I try to do with my mental health management is to stay well enough to live a good life and to keep my mental health um, managed well enough that I can not have my actual physical life at risk again, like it was over a dozen years ago. And so that disclaimer is a big one because I would never advocate for people going off their medication unless you have the help of a medical professional, unless you have gotten to a stage of management that it is a safe choice for you. And not just a safe choice for you, but a healthy choice for you because we want to live our best lives, right? And if this is the way I felt, even 50% of the time, the way that I'm feeling right now, there's no way I would be off medication all the time because it's intense. And if my depression was so severe when the depressive swoops come in, if that was so severe that um if that got to the severity that it was making me feel unsafe or unwell, I would be on meds again. That is an option that I always carry with me. I have the gift of knowing the meds that worked for me in the past, so it will be easier next time if I need them. Also, therapy, even hospitalization, are not things that I consider out of the realm of possibility for myself, but instead, all of these things, friends, are tools. And we need to use the tools that we have access to when they are important to bring into our lives, when we are not functioning. And so that is my meds disclaimer. So, a little bit about my diagnosis is that originally in the hospital, they diagnosed me with severe depression and PTSD. And then after coming out of the hospital and meeting with my psychiatrist and my therapist for a long time and watching my cycles, kind of watching what was working for me, um, my psychiatrist added a bipolar to my like diagnosis. Now, I don't it's complicated. Anyone who has been diagnosed with something for mental health, you know that it's a complicated thing. It's not like you stamp it on and it fits forever, or that like a diagnosis means this is the end all be all, or that people aren't diagnosed with the wrong thing, or misdiagnosed, or diagnoses aren't missed. But for me, bipolar was a good fit for actually something I recognized had been going on my whole life. Um, and I'm not going to define for you exactly what bipolar is and all the types, but I really would recommend you looking that up and learning about it if you want to know more. Depending on where you read, you're going to find different things out. Um, the type of bipolar that I believe uh, I was diagnosed with and that resonates with me still is bipolar 2, or more often I think it's called cyclothmic. I don't know exactly how to say it, but the mania that I experience for the most part is very mild compared to like full blown mania. And the depressive stages that I feel now are much more mild than the ones I used to experience. Um, because of the kind of bipolar that I have, and because of the way bipolar works, there's not like a timeline, there's not like a schedule. I don't know when I'm going to feel myself start amping up, and I don't know when I'm going to feel myself crash. And I also don't always have really clear warning signs. It's not like it always follows this exact feeling of like, oh, I get more amped up and more amped up and more amped up, and then bam, I'm out of control. Or the pattern of like I slowly get sad. Often it just swoops in. Is it plops, it's like appears. Kind of often it feels out of the blue. And for me, um, the cycles don't follow a pattern in terms of how long they last, although I have been spending years trying to track that so that I can predict what's coming. And I don't know. Maybe someday I'll find it. I'll unlock that magical secret, or maybe I won't, and that's okay. I'll talk to you more at the end about what it's like to accept this life that I live and to even embrace it. But I'm at peace with the mystery for the most part. Sometimes it makes me mad. Sometimes it is very frustrating to not feel like I can function the way that I would expect myself to be able to function. But most of the time, with a lot of practice, I have gotten to the place where it just feels like who I am. Like it's just a part of who I am. Just like sometimes sometimes we're more tired than others. Sometimes we're more hungry than others. What I'm discovering as I pay attention and make room for myself to be me is that my mental health is just a part of my existence. My ups and downs, my way of being, it's just a part of being me. And because I can manage it most of the time without going off the deep end, um, which is not the right term, because I can manage it most of the time and stay healthy and not fall into destructive behaviors, I am here. I'm here for the ride for the most part. Sometimes I'm more hesitant than others. And right now, with the intensity of what I've been feeling, I'm not as here for it and enthusiastic about it as I am, for example, when I experience my normal, regular Shawna high, which is just kind of feeling like I'm just a few notches more than everyone else. And I like that feeling. I don't hate that feeling. But when I'm notched up to this, it's a little harder. So let's talk about where I'm currently at. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a number scale. I use this app actually, friends, called Dailyo, and we'll include that link below for you if you go to the blog post with the full description. Dailyo is an app. I'm writing it down so that I don't forget. Is an app that allows you to track your mood. And there's a lot of things you can do on there. You can even track like activities that you do to kind of see if there's correlations. But the app comes originally with, I believe, 5 faces. It's like a really, really bad, like crying, sad, like super sad, melancholy, meh, good, great, something like that. That's not really the names, but as I started tracking in the past, what I found is that on that scale of 5, Shawna lives at a 4 or a 5 most of the time. And so in order to refine my tracking as I'm getting to know myself better, and I'm noticing the difference between the way this manic energy feels, this high feels different. There's a switch that flips between like, I'm super happy. I'm kind of like inexplicably blissful, and this switch to this manic energy, which I'm just using the word manic for how it feels for me. There's not like a medical description that I'm going to be like, yes. You might hear me describe manic and be like, that's not what manic is at all. But I'm just using, what manic has felt like for me. And when I switch into this more manic stage, there's a noted difference. And so I'm tracking again, and this time I added 5 more faces. So now I'm on a scale of 1 to 10, and it allows me to notice when regular Shawna, who is probably a 7, she probably operates at a 7 or even an 8. And that just means that I feel confident, blissful. Everything feels extra colorful to me, extra beautiful, extra wonderful. I happy cry because I'm moved by everything, because I can feel the wondrousness of the world in a way that almost feels extra human. It doesn't feel um when I am in relationship with people and I witness the way they go through the world feeling good or okay, it's different than the way I am at normally, which is more like that 7 energy that I think on my app I might have called it bliss, like blissful. And I love that. I like being there. It's honestly why I chose to step down from my medication um year like 5 years ago maybe, because I missed that being my norm. Although I don't want to talk a lot about the other end of the spectrum during this particular episode because it's just a lot to cover, and because I honestly think the best time to share that experience with you would be when I'm in the middle of it. And trust me, I know that it's coming, so I will share that when the time comes. But the one thing I wanted to share from that perspective of like, the spectrum of mood, if we're talking about mania being 10 and severe depression being 1, the one thing that I wanted to share is just that, um, like I said, I spend most of my time in life in a 7 or an 8, um, sometimes in a 6. I'm not often ever, let me rephrase that. I'm not often ever is a weird statement, and also I think it's too backpedally. I am almost never a 5. Actually, I would say I'm never a 5. I never feel just middle of the road, not happy or not sad. I really don't. I don't think I ever have in my entire life been a person that sits in that space. Um, and so for me, what happens is I will be in the highs and then I will skip through the middle and I will be in the lows. And so when the depressive end of the spectrum kicks in for me, when it starts to show up, um, I'll be like a 3, like a 2. Um, the 1 is where I don't want to get, and my warning signs are when I start settling into those 2s for a long, long period of time. But when I flip down to that, because bipolar is about going to one extreme and then the other, when I flip to my more depressive stage, generally it's going to feel like um, being a 3. It's going to feel like being sad and depressed and maybe a little hopeless. It's going to feel like heaviness. And so I only say that just so that you can kind of understand the contrast, because being in that 7, 8, 9 is so different, and being in that 8 and that 7 energy most of the time is so different than what it feels like to be depressed. And it's also so different than what it feels like right now. So right now, I feel like I am in the heart, hopefully not the beginning stages of a pretty notable manic stage. Manic, by the definitions of this is what I know it feels like for me when I start escalating into those higher, less stable places. And in the interest of just being open and honest about my mental health, I thought, why not come here and just tell you how it literally feels, like what this experience is like for me 4 days into this manic energy phase. So for me, it started on Monday evening. It like happened at midday. I can't even. um, and what it feels like for me, there's like physical feelings, there's mental feelings, and there's kind of like um, some emotional feelings. And so let me tell you about each one. So, from a physical perspective, the biggest sign for me, like the number one indicator, and I learned this way back when I was in the hospital, um, and learning about what depression felt like for me and what those warning signs were. The number one sign on either end of the spectrum for me is this feeling of not fitting in my skin or not belonging in my skin. And when it's depression, if it's a different not belonging in my skin, it's almost like my skin is, I can't explain it, like it doesn't fit me. Like it's not right for me. Um and I'll share with you more about that another day. I don't feel that very often anymore, thank God. But on the manic end of the scale, my not fitting in my skin experience feels like what is happening inside of me is too big for my actual physical body. I feel like I'm literally bursting at the seams. If we had seams in our skin, I might be. Like energy is trying to escape me and it's trapped inside. Um it is The energy is not a feeling. It is a physical feeling. It's this amped up feeling. And um when it's at extremes like this, it doesn't fit inside of my body. When it's at that healthy 6 or 7, it feels right. It feels like, yeah, this is good. And I feel, great about it. But when it starts amping up into this range, it feels like it's more than me. It's not even, it ceases to feel like just even my own. And what happens is that on a from a physical perspective, I can't stay still. I'm kind of amazed that I've stayed still long enough to say these things. Talking actually helps me process energy. And so the only time I can sit still is if I'm talking, which can be problematic. It's one of the bipolar mania signs is like excessive talking. And I'm a talker anyways, but I can have this urgency to my excessive talking that happens where it's like I'm just trying to get things outside of me. It's like I'm trying to take this massive energy force and like push it out of me. If you're watching me on YouTube, my husband has been like playfully laughing with me at some of the weird physical things I've been doing this week because I'm like literally punching the air. I'm actually punching the air on a regular basis. I'm also pacing a lot. Um, like it's not like I'm intentionally pacing. It's more like I keep standing up, like I have a thing to go do, and I'll find myself walking like around my house, almost in circles, like I'm wearing a pathway down my hallway, just processing energy and with this feeling like there's something I need to be doing. It never feels, if I'm not taking active awareness to it, it doesn't feel like I'm trying to process energy. It feels like there's something urgent I have to do and I don't know what it is. Or I have forgotten it, or maybe I remember it, but it's a silly, urgent thing. Like, oh my gosh, I have to go move this thing from this place to this place. Like, it is intense, and it is intense is the right word. It's like an intensity of energy flowing from me. Um, so like, yeah, I'll punch the air. I'll like move around. At dinner the other night, my whole family watched me just like not be able to sit still. And even sometimes when I will be quiet for a minute, I like, did you hear that breath? What will happen is I'll get quiet. And as soon as I'm not moving and I'm not speaking, I can feel it rising inside of me. Does this make me sound a little crazy? probably, but it feels a little crazy. So that's fair. Um, the other thing that I'm noticing is that I'm weird with eating right now. I mean, I'm always weird with eating, as in I just kind of eat what I want when I want, and that's my eating lifestyle. But my appetite is wacky. Like I can't imagine eating a single thing and then I'm famished. So it's like this intensity of um when I think about eating, I don't feel nonchalant about it. I feel like there's no way. What? Like, no, that would be awful. Or I feel like um if I don't go eat right now, I might die. And I'm sure that cycle perpetuates itself because I'm not hungry and then I am so hungry. But at the extreme, the way that it manifests and the way that it's manifesting right now is just, it feels extreme and it feels a little crazy making. Um, and as well, also sleeping is very hard, very, 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 very hard when that manic energy is rising. When I'm at my, I've, I'm never, I've always been a terrible sleeper. And I think a piece of that is probably because I carry a lot of energy and because I live life in more of that high energy place. But um, I've found strategies in my adulthood that have really helped me sleep, like some really solid things that have solved that for me. But right now, those strategies are not making me sleep. I'm just awake and I'm not worried. I'm not like processing tangible thoughts in my head. Like I'm not sitting up the way that anxiety, which is part of the mania feeling is anxiousness, but the way that anxiety manifests for me has always been very physical. I learned in the hospital the words somatic anxiety, and somatic is things you process in the body, and so my thoughts aren't anxious, like I'm worried about things. My thoughts are just they're just racing. They're like ideas, they're inspirations sometimes. They're also like things I need to know. Like, um, last night I must have looked up about 17 things on my phone because I was like, I'm not going to be okay if I don't answer this question right now. And they're silly things like, how is the foundation of a house built? Or, I mean, just silly things, not things that are urgent, but the sense that I feel the prevailing sense is urgency. Um, and everything inside me feels faster. I don't know. I'm looking right now at my Fitbit to see if my heart rate is actually faster. It's not. I mean, it's 86, so it's a little fast. That's a little fast for sitting here. But it's not just that my heart feels fast, it's like everything inside of my body feels like it's just racing. I don't even know how to tell you how I know that, but I feel it. It's everywhere. Um, the other thing is that like I'm noticing that I'm getting really hot all of the sudden and really sweaty, which is probably a symptom of everything in my body like being amped up, like something is activated. Um, so that's what it feels like. Um, and as you can imagine, if you are moving nonstop, can't stop doing, can't stop thinking, if your heart rate is elevated, if you are like, have this go, 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 go going on, and then also you can't bring yourself to eat and you can't bring yourself to sleep, Not friends, don't worry. I'm not starving. Those are signs that I watch carefully because if I was literally not eating at all, that would be a warning sign that I need to elevate my level of care, right? If I was, um, if those kinds of things get to the point where I'm not safe, that's when we have to take it up a notch. And I'm going to talk about that when I talk about my coping strategies. Um, but as you can imagine, if I'm not eating and I'm not sleeping and everything about me is operating as if I'm running a marathon, I am also drained. There's a physical feeling. It's not even a physical feeling because I'm so overwhelmed with that pervasive, overflowing energy feeling. But I know that I'm drained. Like if you look at me, you can see that I'm drained. Um, and it's because I am, because I'm like my energy is sucking out of me, and I'm still a human being, so that there's something not sustainable about that, which is why oftentimes a manic phase is followed by a depressive phase because I'm this is like the life in me is like the life force in me is like flowing out of me at such an intense rate that there is going to have to be recovery. And I recognize that because I've been practicing awareness and self-care through ups and downs for 12 years now. So my mental signs along with those physical signs are that I feel that anxiousness in my body. And although that's not really a mental sign, it kind of is because obviously we're processing everything right through our head. And the best I recognized a few years into my treatment that for me, that anxiety feels a lot like do you know that feeling when you trip. Like you're walking along and you trip on something and you know you're going to fall. Like the moment before you fall, that moment of knowing that something is happening, like that something could happen terrible, that's how it feels. I'm not thinking of all the terrible things that could happen. I'm feeling it in my system. And that anxious energy is really intense because it's adrenaline ridden, right? Like when we feel physically at danger, there's a lot of adrenaline to that. And they talk about co-occurring conditions in mental health, and the PTSD that I experience feels very similar to that anxious, overwhelming ah feeling. But the difference is that it's not just that feeling that I'm experiencing. I'm also like that drive to move forward. So when PTSD is intense, um, I want to get in bed and like try to soothe that anxious energy. But getting in bed does not sound soothing when you're feel like you can't stop moving. And so that's kind of how I'm feeling. The other thing I'm feeling is the I can feel my thoughts come in. Oh, somebody called it a thought frenzy. And that's such a good description, which if you have ADHD, you might kind of understand what I'm talking about. And I have that feeling with ADHD often too, but this is like that on steroids because every thought feels in ADHD, they talk about hyperfocus, where you think of a thing that you need to do, and then it's like you can't not think about that one thing. Like you get zoned in on one very important thing. I would say that what this feels like is this frenzy of thoughts and ideas and um, problems to solve and things to do that are all coming in simultaneously, or at least one after the other. Like they're like, it's like a card shuffle. Like they're like just coming, but every single one has that hyper focus intensity feeling to me. So I feel like I can do nothing and I have to do everything. And when I start doing a thing, the urgency that I feel to do all of the other things simultaneously are like enveloping me. And that is why I really do like to want to distinguish the difference between what it feels like to operate at that 7 or 8 that I talked about, at that like blissful, I can take on the world level where I do dive in and tackle things and feel that intensity. But this click into that more manic feeling is a whole different beast. It's a whole different urgency. It's a whole different feeling. And so I have to I'm like constantly catching myself. That's what it feels like. And so I'm constantly like stopping and trying to settle that internal energy, taking that breath, exhaling because there are so many things happening. Um, that being said, in the mental department, there are good things, things that feel good too. Because part of mania is feeling really confident. There's like a super Shawna feeling like that maybe I could never sleep again and save the world overnight. Maybe, and that sounds silly, but like on a more like practical level, I really have thought like maybe I don't sleep tonight and instead I redesign my entire website, or maybe I can do all of these things. Like maybe not even maybe, like I can and I must because there's a sense of overinflated capability that comes with this intense energy. Also, there's a confidence and a sense of like there's a little bit of a disconnect from that more those insecurities that usually fill my thoughts, perhaps because my thoughts are so filled with all of the urgency, you know what I mean. However, it also feels scary, and um there is an there is a there is a sobering fear that lives in this space too. Um, I mean, maybe even more so with self-awareness, there's a sobering fear in this place because I know that I can't stay up all night and not eat and run circles around my house for 1,000 years. Like, I know that's not possible. I know that with the intensity of energy that I am expelling right now, that I'm going to get really tired. Also, the scary things that come to mind are more like interpersonal. Like, what if, oh, I do videos regularly where I tear up a little bit. It's a little harder, I think, on a podcast to feel comfortable doing that, but also it's a little harder to feel comfortable tearing up from like a vulnerable, scared place, right? So bear with me. But it's scary to think that this urgent, intense version of myself is what is showing up for my family, for my
my dearest friends, um, for you here, for my husband who's infinitely patient with me, but I know it's not easy on others when I get manic or when I crash. Um, and so of course that feels scary because nobody wants to do nobody wants to be a person that is um causing hardship for those around them. And also on a more like selfish level, nobody wants to be a person that's hard to be around. Nobody wants to be a person that is um when I'm depressed, that's sad and, and depressed and depressing, but also like I don't want to be a person that's bulldozing over people in conversations, that's talking nonstop, that's maybe saying things insensitively or making impulsive decisions that would hurt people. And so, of course, there's fear there too. The other obvious thing that looms, especially because I know from experience what it's like to cycle really high and really low. That other fear that looms is just that I know what it's like to have that crash afterwards. I know what it's like to get into the lows on my depressive cycle, and um that I don't want to go there. So there's fear there too. I mean, it's a healthy, realistic fear, but also, it can get in your head. It's so um it's such a balance that I sit with when I'm in my highs and my lows, where a part of me does not want to do this zigzag. A part of me would just like to function like a normal person. But also, 100% honestly, I don't want to lose my magic either. And part of my magic is in the makeup of my chemical brain. And I actually like some of those parts about myself. And so it feels scary to, mm, if I don't catch myself, what I can do is start fortune telling. I can start future predicting and think and telling myself that, oh, this is going to be that time where it gets so bad that I have to take more extreme measures to manage this disorder. Um, and those measures aren't managing your mental health is a job, and those management measures involve giving up certain things or introducing new things into my body like medications, or even just like the hard work of change. So I don't want that. And so I have to actively not let myself get too caught up in the what's this going to mean for me, because the truth is we don't know, right? And so instead it's just about being right here in this kind of crazy making place.
Friends, like I mentioned when I was introing this episode, we are going to break this episode in half for you. So we are going to stop right here and give ourselves a little breather and also just give you an easy stop point so that you're not sitting for hours trying to digest all of the things that I am sharing. When we come back in our next episode, which will be live later this week, I am going to be sharing with you more specifically about the strategies that I use during the struggle to give you maybe some inspiration, some ideas, and to give all of us some hope because even when things feel hard, we always have tools sometimes buried deep, deep within us, but we all have tools that can help us see our way through. So I'm looking forward to coming back later this week with the rest of this episode to share with you how I cope when I'm feeling this kind of manic high energy coursing through me. Thank you again for being with me. We will talk more soon.